Yo guys, Vision SGN here, bringing you Marvel Rivals Best Competitive Team Part 4, where we'll be breaking down the 4th best lineup to be using right now in competitive, using all different heroes to my previous lineups. Now this is based on the newest Season 1.5 update. This lineup itself is very unique and used in certain situations, but also can be used to counter the number 1 lineup in the game, and also will consist of all characters and heroes that have not been used in my previous 3 lineups, and I'll explain how to use all of the 6 heroes in this video based on their roles, whilst also identifying what adjustments you want to consider and explaining when and why you'd make them. And on that note, let's get right into it. Now, as for the roster itself, I won't be going over a guide as such on all of their abilities, as I'll be making separate hero guides on this on my channel, and for the most part, I'm assuming that anyone that's watching this video and learning about the best comp lineups right now following the latest Season 1.5 update is already fully aware of what most of the heroes can do and their abilities. So for this lineup, we'll be using 6 new heroes that haven't already been used in the previous 3 episodes to demonstrate the variety that Marvel Rivals offers, to show you that you can use all sorts of different heroes and different comps to work to your best strengths and weaknesses. Now, this team is a more dive-based team, not a well-balanced team as such, whereas in the previous 3 episodes, it's been a bit of a mixture. Now, I just wanted to note before I break down this current lineup, that this is a specialist lineup, unique for certain maps and modes, such as the Clintar map, defense on the payload game mode, and for pretty much for the most of the maps on the defensive side, but also for domination on most of the maps, but mainly for the Asgard Palace map, due to the dive comp being more effective, and also the crowd control working extremely successfully from my own experience using this, and seeing this comp used in competitive. So as for the roster itself and its construction, I'll go through all 6 heroes in this lineup, and then we'll get on to how the team is structured, who you want to ban and why, and then we'll go over the adjustments, when you'd make them, and why you'd make them. So as for number 1 on this team, you want to have Penny as your main tank, as she will be great at dealing crowd control and point pressure, utilising her traps and her web stun ability to both alleviate dives and help control the point. Now, as for the second tank in this lineup, and as usual in all my other episodes, we like to run a 2-2-2 setup, which for anyone new here, that is a 2 tank, a 2 strategist, and a 2 duelist setup. Now, as for the second tank, we'll be using Venom, as he'll be responsible for sustain, diving on the back line and backing down healers when needed, and then also retreating back for his team to support both the strategist and the duelist. As for your third hero and your first duelist, you'll want to be using Spider-Man, as he works really well with his team ability with both Penny and Venom. He'll be your primary diving lead. He separates players extremely well using his mobility and his map pull ability, but as well as his crowd control ultimate, which is really effective for, as I mentioned, for point objective modes where you can alleviate the pressure on the point using Penny and then dive away or dive onto the backline players to cause them problems. Now, seeing as this team already has quite a lot of dives, you'll now want to consider having someone with a bit more range and situated more closer to your support players to both help them and also change a bit of the pacing around the map. So for the 4th character and the 2nd duelist, you'll want to add Squirrel Girl into this lineup. As I mentioned, she's really good from range at dealing damage, as well as the splash damage that it could be used to destroy the shields, but also she deals good deep range damage and backline damage to the support heroes, which prevents them from healing, and of course, her ultimate is really good at controlling the objective and applies pressure on the point, which is crucial for this lineup as you're looking to secure the point and prevent the enemy team from contesting, and also just secure the objective at most of the point in this game. Now, for the first healer on this team and the 5th character that you want to be using, you'll want to consider using Mantis as your main healer, but also as a damage buffer for both your 6th player and Penny, as well as Squirrel Girl, and also being able to freeze enemies when they dive, and you can apply pressure to those characters almost as a counter dive hero. Now for the 6th and final spot, which of course, as I mentioned in all my other videos, is always interchangeable, for this lineup, as we're having a 2-2-2 setup, we'll have the final support that's not been used in any of these lineups, Adam Warlock, who's an amazing aerial sniper and a great secondary support healer. So this character will definitely work really well in this lineup, as you don't really have someone that can deal with anyone like Storm that's in the sky and being a bit of a nuisance, or maybe an Iron Man. So this is definitely good to have him in this lineup, but also as a secondary healer, he's really effective in that sense, and also with his ultimate being really effective for bringing the entire team back onto the objective to be able to contest and focus on keeping that objective pressure, whilst also providing both your Spider-Man and Venom that freedom ability to be able to dive, knowing that they could be fully rezzed when your Adam Warlock has his ability in his back pocket. So it's really useful to understand that. But for this lineup and how it would counter the main lineup, as I mentioned, you have Squirrel Girl that can deal a lot of damage and splash to destroy the shields of Doctor Strange. You then have Venom and Spider-Man being able to dive freely and cause so many problems and disrupt the healing ults and their progression and their effectiveness. And then of course you have the likes of Penny that can crowd control the objective, preventing players like Black Panther and Hulk from being as effective. And then of course your healers, Warlock is able to then snipe the likes of Iron Man and Storm and be a good backline support player, as well as Mantis being a counter dive character, as well as your primary healer for this lineup. And as I mentioned, this is a great unique lineup, different to the standard setups that you typically see, but as I mentioned, in certain situations, this lineup would excel and could definitely and almost has the capability at countering the best lineup in the game right now. Now, with a structured team, and as I mentioned in all of my other videos, you need to understand the game plan before you use this type of lineup, and you need to understand how to execute it, learning the strengths and weaknesses of your lineup and where you are most vulnerable as both an individual character but also as a team. So for this structure, you don't necessarily have to be communicating with your teammates, although that obviously will help. And at the higher levels, you will notice that players with in the diamond level or above, they will simply just understand which lineup works and they will change their role or hero selection to make the team work, or they may ask you to change to suit their style and it will fit in. But if you saw this lineup and you pick the remaining spot that was available, I promise you this could work. You just need people to understand exactly what they're meant to be doing in each of their role and play that role perfectly, as that's the way this system works. And it's what I call reading between the lines in all of my other videos. For players to be able to just see a map or a matchup and then know that that lineup would work better or why. And of course, it's usually based on personal experience, but also having trust in the system you're playing in and that players are going to play their role well. It will allow you to win games more effectively. Now, as for who you want to ban, when you would, and why, I would consider not banning Wolverine purely because Penny isn't necessarily bothered by this due to her crowd control and the traps being quite of a counter itself to Wolverine, therefore he's not actually that impactful. And also Venom seems to be able to stay alive and get away from situations, also making Wolverine less impactful. So if there's any game where Wolverine doesn't get banned and he can be used and you think the other team's going to use him, this is where I would also consider trying these sort of characters and this lineup. And as I mentioned, because this team is a diving comp, you want to basically ban the counter dives because that's where your team is going to thrive. And as you're already applying a lot of pressure to the point and trying to control the objective, you're kind of comfortable on that front already. So really you want to be banning players like Namor. I would ignore the likes of Magic and Storm, as again, your team deals with them pretty well and makes them a little less effective, but definitely ban the likes of Namor. And then you may want to consider maybe banning either a healer that could be quite effective that you're not using, such as Cloak or Luna. So that way you can then take away Namor being as effective if he's not able to be banned. And then also you can consider banning the likes of maybe Thor or Hulk, who seem to be quite effective at causing problems for your backline players, especially Mantis and Warlock. So I would definitely consider taking them out of the way, and that way you can have your healers and your supports playing to their strengths and being more impactful that way. And then as for the adjustments and when you'd make them and why, and as the reasons why you would change all of the characters in this lineup, we'll start with Penny. And if the crowd control isn't as effective or you need more damage in this lineup, I would consider changing this hero to Magneto for his high damage output and his shields that can allow the support players to be well protected and mitigate all incoming damage. But for the most part, I would consider trying to keep Penny in this lineup as she will thrive. The traps are a pain in the ass to destroy for the other team, so it would work really well for controlling the objective. And as I mentioned, remember, this is a unique lineup designed to point pressure and crowd control, as well as benefiting dives. So just consider that, and of course her team up ability with both Venom and Spider-Man. However, Venom has high mobility, great crowd control with both his tether ability and his ultimate, as well as insane sustain using his shield ability. However, his main weakness is counter dives, and if this comp isn't working because they have a Namor or they have characters that can prevent this character from being effective, I would then simply change this character to Hulk for his ability to control the battlefield using his mobility as well, but has a high survivability, and especially when paired with other strong supports, makes him a little bit more effective. And therefore, if you're going to change the setup of using Venom, you may want to then consider changing Spider-Man to Winter Soldier if the two-man diving setup just isn't working, or if you need to counter the likes of Thor, or if you need more range damage, then this character would definitely work and benefit from this lineup. Now, as for Squirrel Girl, I would change her to Namor if you need more dive protection, or maybe Star-Lord for his team-up ability with both Mantis and Warlock. And if neither of them work, then maybe try and use Hela for the Loki team-up if you want to swap out Warlock, seeing as Hela is super easy to use, really simple, with great hit scan attacks and a high critical DPS, making her really effective and can be easily inserted into the lineup, especially if you have the team-up benefits with the likes of Loki. Now, as for Squirrel Girl, it is worth considering that she constantly can apply splash damage from distance, which will work really well in this lineup, as the other team supports will constantly be trying to deal with the likes of your team's dives, and also this hero helps protect counter dives using her Acorn ability, as well as her team up with Spider-Man, which makes her really effective at crowd controlling the backline and stopping and slowing down those diving characters. Now, as for Mantis, I would consider changing her to Rocket for the Winter Soldier team up if you need more damage buffs for him, and also if the other team has a Strange, Rocket is great at tearing through that shield, so definitely consider this. Now, as for Warlock, you could use Loki instead as a primary healer with Rocket, or pair him alongside Mantis, which would typically work, and he gets that really cool team-up ability with Hela, so if you swap Squirrel Girl to Hela, consider using Loki. Also, if the other team has 2 healers, you can also use Loki's ult to then mirror one of theirs to gain a more defensive ult for your team if you feel like you need that on the point pressure. As for all of the team ups of the named heroes that I've just gone through, here's a quick summary of all of those potential link ups to consider when you're forming your team, which is really important that you do consider this when you're making the team and seeing who works well with what. Now, the first one would be Venom having his team up with Penny and Spider-Man. The second would be Spider-Man and Squirrel Girl. The third would be Adam Warlock with Mantis and Star-Lord. As for the fourth one, you get Winter Soldier and his Rocket team up. But of course, you would then be taking away Mantis, and then of course for the fifth one, you would get the Hela and Loki team up, which of course you'd be replacing Warlock. So therefore, you probably wouldn't want to have Star-Lord, as both Mantis and Warlock are no longer in this lineup. Now, of course, instead of Hulk, you could then also consider using Thor, as you then have a new lineup that would look a little like this. You'd have Thor, Winter Soldier, Hela, Rocket, Loki, and then as for the sixth player, you can either have a third heal if you feel you need this, and then you can have Cloak for the lock-on effect, or you can have a second tank, and that way you can have Groot, which you then have that team up with Rocket, and this would be a pretty good squad if you needed to change it up mid-game, as you're still maintaining a lot of team ups with this new lineup, and that way you can change the dynamic of the game if your initial plan isn't working. And as for the other characters who are also worth shouting out, there's definitely other heroes that you can insert into this lineup that would work, such as Psylocke, as she's a great hybrid, Hawkeye or Black Widow for their marksman and sniping abilities, and of course, as well as the new heroes, both the Thing and the Human Torch, which are definitely worth considering. I've actually made 2 separate videos on my channel of hero guides for these characters, so feel free to go check them out in the channel. They're linked in the description below. But I'm actually planning on making a separate new episode which will contain the full team for the Fantastic Four in the next upcoming episode, so stay tuned for this one. But anyways, there you have it. That's the 4th best lineup to be using in the game right now. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and let me know if you have any alterations that you would make to this current lineup, and let me know why. I'm Vision SGN, and I'll see you in the next one.